Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brandon Harrelson. I am the Communications Manager, Engagement and Public Policy with ArtsKC. I thank you so much for joining us in this critical discussion. I know that many of you have had questions for many weeks, many months now with the continued postponement of the opening of the SVOG portal. But with its opening, I believe Monday, I'm so happy that we're able to bring these experts together, these incredible, knowledgeable people together to lend us a hand, to give us some insight, and to offer some answers to some of your questions. So with that, real quick, Rebecca, I know I said I was going to turn it over to you, but we actually have Michael Barrett with us from the SBA, and I just want to give him, because I know that he's kind of on a time crunch, I want to give him the opportunity to just speak to us briefly. So Michael, if you want to unmute yourself, and if you want to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your office and what you all do. Oh, Michael, we can't hear you, or at least I can't. Nope. Michael, you might try going out and coming back in. Okay. Okay, we'll see here in just a second. I wasn't the only one who couldn't hear him, right? Okay, good. All right. Let's wait for. In the meantime, let me go ahead and introduce our three presenters today. But first, Michelle Kretzinger, she is with the SBDC office. She has been a fantastic partner in this, and that's her there. Thank you so much, Michelle, for all of your help in getting this set up. Also, I'm just going in order here. Joel Barrett, who is a contractor and partner with the SBDC office as well. And then we have Rebecca Gubbels. Is that right, Rebecca? Is that how you say your last name? Okay, good. And then we also have Rebecca Lobina here. So she's also with the SBDC office. So with that, let me see if I can get Michael one more time. Oh, no, that was, let me add him real quick.
Can you guys hear me?
There we go.
There we go. Okay,
go ahead. Go for it. Thank you so much, Michael.
Oh, no, and I apologize for that. I really appreciate you inviting me to be part of this. It's interesting that when I got on this, I was on a venue call, and then I got a call from an artist who's a friend of mine here in town, has some questions about different things. I'm talking to them. Then I got 2 other calls and want to get on your call. So I'm so appreciative of being here. And I see you got some great, some of our great partners here from SBDCs. They're very knowledgeable about what's going on with this. But I did hear some stats. I know the thing just opened up on Monday. I know there's a lot of issues about getting that open up. But interesting enough, they said that they had about 20 applications in the queue, but only 9,000 people have actually submitted their applications. And one of the questions we had going on was that why people are filling their applications out and not actually submitting them. So if anybody has any insight of that, I'd really appreciate that. They do want to get people to submit those so they can start processing it. These applications are pretty intense. I know that you're done and they got to verify everything. So if you do have any insight on that, please get your applications in, but be sure and submit them so that we can get you the money that you're going to need. But other than that, I'm so glad our partners are here because they're your best source as far as trying to help and assisting people in filling out these applications and getting them done. But I look forward to working with everyone. I was talking to my friend here. See, I normally do a bunch of business stuff. I said, I need to do something different. I need to get into the arts. I want to get into the arts. I can't draw anything, but I like the business of it all. I like the camaraderie a lot of people have in doing this because art means so many different things. I have a cousin that is a executive chef now, and I went and ate at her restaurant the other day. She's part of that restaurant Cliffs right there on 31st and Gillen, and the stuff they came out was just amazing. So to me, that's all common art and all the different things that people do, whether you're making jewelry, whether you're painting, whatever you're doing, performing. To me, that's all art, and I'm so glad to be part of what you guys are doing. Hopefully, I can do more with the Arts Commission as we move forward.
Excellent. Yeah, we definitely thank you for your partnership, Michael, and thank you for joining us today. And I will, if we glean any information that might be helpful as far as application and any other information that might be useful to the SBA, I will certainly pass it along as well. So with that, I will pass it over to Rebecca Lobina. Thank you so much for being here, and you take it away.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay, thank you. To Michael's point, I wanted to add that I've actually worked with some people who have been submitting their applications online, and they've stopped because they have a question about one of the questions that's on the application and they're not sure what to do. So I bet that's what a lot of them are doing, is they're just waiting to make sure they answer their questions, the questions correctly before they actually submit it so that it doesn't get kicked back to them. So at least that could be part of an explanation. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Okay. So I am with the St. Joseph office for the Small Business Development Center, and I've been with the SBDC for about 14 years now. But this is all new. This is new for everybody, even us seasoned people with the SBDC. So, because we just haven't seen anything like this in our lifetime. So that's one of the reasons it's taking so long with everything. All right, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. I'm going to go over the eligibility, the use of funds, how you can apply, and then some tips or tricks, if you will, from the limited amount of people that I've worked with who have actually applied through the portal, which just opened up yesterday or Saturday. All right, so first of all, who is eligible? If you were in operation as of February 29th of last year, and you are either currently open or plan to reopen, then you can apply. And the website where you go to apply, svograntportal.sba.gov, is listed on the slide. And I'll share my slides with everyone after this. In addition to those two criteria for being eligible to apply, you also have to have one of the following as your principal business activity: either a live venue operator or a promoter of a live venue, a theatrical producer, a live performing arts organization operator, a relevant museum operator, a motion picture theater operator, or a talent rep. Now, if you are a talent rep, you have to currently be representing talent. You can't have stopped doing that. You could have temporarily, but you do have to currently be representing talent. So that caveat there is just for talent reps. Everybody else can actually be closed if that's the case, but just be willing to reopen. So in addition to these items, you also have to show a 25% or more gross earned revenue reduction in one quarter of 2020 when compared to that same quarter in 2019. So be open as of February 29th, either in operation or going to be in operation, are one of those principal businesses we talked about, and show a 25% or more loss in 2020, in at least one quarter of 2020. All right, so we're going to talk about the difference between gross and net, because this has actually gotten some of the people I've spoke with, especially museums, questioning whether or not they can apply. So gross is what the amount of money that you get before any deductions or expenses come into play. Net is after expenses are accounted for. And then earned revenue versus gross revenue or gross receipts. Earned revenue is anything that you've sold, because for some of these things that we're going to talk about during this presentation, we're going to talk about just overall gross receipts, and other things are specific only to earned revenue, not gross, okay? So gross includes everything. Earned is only something that you have sold. So you have sold tickets or merchandise or food and drinks for at your venue, or you've sold memberships or school tuition if you're a dance school or something along those lines, or you receive rent from someone and there's a contract in place for that rent. So those are examples of earned revenue. What's not considered earned is things like donations, sponsorships, in-kind, and trades. Those are part of your gross revenue, but they are not part of your calculated earned revenue. And fundraising, the reason there's an asterisk beside fundraising is because there is a portion of fundraising that you can count as earned revenue if it covers the cost of like food that was sold. So if someone has a fundraiser dinner and whatever the cost of that dinner is for each person, that part can be considered earned revenue, split out from the rest of it, which would just be the donation. All right, so who cannot apply? Any venues that are of a prurient sexual nature cannot apply for this grant. If you are delinquent on federal debts, if in 2019 you had more than 10% of your gross revenues come from federal resources, then you would not be able to apply. If you have had a felony or have been on probation or currently on probation for fraud, bribes, or embezzlement in the last 5 years, you cannot apply. Or if you are currently incarcerated, you cannot apply. Drive-in movie theaters are not eligible. Traditional movie theaters are, but drive-in movie theaters are not. Traveling performances such as carnivals, for the most part, won't meet the eligibility, but if they are able to meet the other eligibility requirements of having a defined audience space, we're going to talk about that in a second, and a defined performance space, then they would be able to apply, but most carnivals will not have that. If you filed bankruptcy since February 29th of last year, it's questionable whether you will be eligible. So on the actual application, it does ask if you have filed bankruptcy in the last few years, or sorry, since February 29th. And if you have, then you have to state what kind of bankruptcy it was, Chapter 7, 11, or 13, and you have to upload your bankruptcy papers. And then they will make the decision on whether or not you can still move forward with applying. And if two of these things apply to you, so you have to have two things out of this category that apply to you, then you would not be eligible. So you can't be owned by anyone that sells interest on the securities exchange. You cannot operate in more than 10 states, cannot operate in more than just this one country, cannot employ more than 500 full-time employees as of February 29. So again, you have to meet two of those things. So if you have more than 500 employees, but you're good on everything else, you're fine. Okay, so if you have more than 500 employees, you can still apply as long as one of those other things doesn't exist. Okay. And then there is a limit of 5 affiliates. So if you have like a corporate headquarters that owns other affiliates, then only 5 entities total under that corporate umbrella can apply for this grant. All right, so eligible entities for the live performing arts. Live performing arts applies to comedy clubs, of course, concerts, plays, any other type of performing arts or other events by performing artists. And it also pertains to anyone who organizes, promotes, or produces these particular live events as well. All right, so in order to be categorized as a live performing arts venue, you have to have a defined performance and audience space. Now you can lease that space, you don't have to own it. There's nothing in any of the rules or regulations or the bill itself that states that you have to own the entity or the venue where you have the performances. But wherever you do have them, there has to be a specified audience space and a specified performance space, like a stage. It doesn't have to be a stage, but that would be a defined performance space. Additionally, so this is and, not or. So, and you have to have mixing equipment and a public address system, which means like a loudspeaker of some sort and like a microphone where you can talk to an audience, and a lighting rig at the location. You have to also have at least one person or more who carries out at least 2 of the following roles listed here. So it can be the same person that does these things. They can have a different title than this as long as they carry out these roles. That's the important part. At least one person that carries out at least 2 of these roles. So again, we're still just talking about being eligible. In addition to this, you do have to have paid performers, and they do have to be paid fairly, either by a contract, a set amount, or you know, a percentage of sales, ticket sales, or something like that. Now, the reason there's an asterisk there is because paid performers includes independent contractors, and also if you are a nonprofit and you have volunteers who do performances for you, so the actors are actually volunteers, that's okay. But if that's the case, if you're a nonprofit who does not pay the performers, then you must have employees that you do pay to manage and produce the shows. You have to also charge for the events. Again, I mentioned nonprofits don't have to charge for their events, but everybody else who is a for-profit entity must have some type of charge, and that can be a cover charge at the door. It can be a drink minimum, like at a comedy club, or actual ticket sales. The performances have to be marketed in advance of when they're showing, and the marketing can be, it doesn't have to be paid marketing. It can be flyers, it can be social media marketing, it can be information put on your website, but you do have to show how you market the performances, and you'll be asked for evidence of that and to upload evidence of that in the actual portal for this grant. And then either one of these things, tickets are made available for not less than 60 days before the event, or not less than 70% of the earned revenue is from live events. So that's kind of the minimum. At least 70% of your earned revenues have to come from live events in order to be considered a live performing arts venue. If that's not the case, then if all of your events that you do have are at least marketed and tickets are available for 60 days before that event occurs, then you're okay. So it's just one or the other. And there's a little note there too that if you are a talent rep or a promoter, then just the majority of the talent or whatever you're promoting has to be done at a live venue. So majority meaning more than half. But on top of that, you do still have to have 70% of your revenues as the principal business operations as a talent rep or promoter. All right, so that was for live performing arts. Now we're going to talk about museums, and the way they're categorized is they're called relevant museums. So again, still had to be in operation as of February 29th, still have to show a 25% earned revenue loss in at least one quarter of 2020. And they do have to operate as a museum as their principal business activity. They also have to have an indoor exhibition space, which was or still is subject to occupancy restrictions due to the pandemic. And then this particular one that just came up has kicked a lot of museums out of the running, but they have to have at least one room with fixed seating and regular programming. So the SBA defined regular programming as approximately 4 times a month on average. And fixed seating is defined as seating that is either so heavy it is extremely difficult to move it or almost impossible to move it, making it essentially immobile, or it is fixed, like bolted down, or it's concrete benches or something like that where it cannot be moved. So you must have fixed seating. A lot of museums have a room that has seating and programming, but the seating is movable. They can move the chairs around, they can move the tables around. They don't have actual fixed seating. And for those particular museums, they would not be eligible for this grant. And as far as museums go, they cannot be for-profit. They must be a nonprofit, and they will be asked to show evidence of their nonprofit status as part of the application process. So live performing arts can be for-profit or nonprofit, doesn't matter, but museums must be nonprofit. All right, so now that we know who is eligible to actually apply, let's talk about who gets what when. So the priority. The first 14 days, so we know that the grant is open for applications now. The first 14 days, you had to show a 90% or greater gross, not earned, but gross revenue loss. Those are the ones that they're going to actually get funding the first 14 days. That revenue loss is not based on the whole year. That revenue loss is based on only April 1st, 2019 to the end of 2019 compared to that same time frame in 2020. So just those last 3 quarters of 2019 and 2020 is what they're looking at. They're going to want to see a 90% or greater gross revenue loss. After the first 14 days have passed, next in line for the next 2 weeks after that is if you show a 70% or greater gross revenue loss, again, for those same dates, the last 3 quarters of 2019 compared to the last 3 quarters of 2020, you show a 70% or greater loss. So that's who is going to actually be able to get funding during the first 28 days. CARES funds that an entity has received do not count towards your revenue when you're calculating your revenue loss. So you can remove that when you're calculating your revenue loss. There's expected to be a second round of supplemental funds, even if you received funds during the first 28 days. But that is only if there are funds left. So any funds that are left after the first 28 days have passed, they're going to have a 28-day grace period after that, and then a second round opens up. So in other words, it's just opened up really on Saturday. I'm not sure when they're using their calendar counting here, but let's say it's Saturday. Saturday was registration, I think. I can't remember if that was just registration or if that was also the application, but I think applications began yesterday. So 2 weeks from then is the first set of priorities. 2 weeks after that is the second set of priorities. Then there will be a 28-day jaunt where no one can apply. And then if they've determined that there's still funding left, they will reopen the portal. All right. So if you're able to apply, how much can you get? It's pretty straightforward. If you were in operation as of January 1st of 2019, then you'll receive 45% of your gross earned revenues of 2019 minus any PPP funds. And they are using the calendar year for all of their calculations when it comes to your gross revenue, your earned revenue, and whether or not you show a loss from one quarter to the next. They are using the calendar year. So whatever your earned revenues were in 2019, you'll receive 45% of that minus any PPP funds that you've received. Whether you've received 1 or 2 PPPs does not matter. You're still eligible, but those funds will be subtracted from the total amount you receive. If you weren't in operation on January 1st, and so you came into operation after that time, but before February 29th of 2020, then there's a calculation for you to use as well, where you multiply the average monthly gross revenue for each full month that you were in operation during 2019. And you cannot receive more than $10 million. That's the most that any one entity can receive. And of note, when we talk about how much is available, $15 billion was made available when the bill came out initially at the end of December, and then it was updated in March with an additional $1.25 billion. So a total of $16.25 billion has been allocated to this grant, of which $2 billion is specifically reserved for entities with less than 50 employees. That's just how much is reserved for the really small businesses, but that is not considered part of the priority group. So the priority groups that we just talked about on the previous slide that can apply during the first 28 days has nothing to do with the number of employees they have, but has everything to do with how much loss they had in 2020. Okay, so if you get the money, you do have to use it, and you have until, depending on whether you get an extension or not, through June of next year for expenses that you can use it on, and you have 1 year to use it. So I want to clarify that. You can use it on expenses that you incurred from March 1st of last year. So you can back pay things, back pay yourself if you gave yourself a loan, or if you want to make employees whole because you reduced their payroll or something, you can do that. From March 1st of last year, expenses through the end of this year, so almost 2 full years of expenses you can use this money for. But once the money is dispersed, you only have 1 year to use it. So let's say you're in that first round, you get the money here in the next couple of weeks. And so you would have from May of this year until, the end of, if you got it May 1st, you have till April 30th of next year to use it. So you'd have a whole year to use it, but you can only use it on expenses through the end of this year, unless you file for an extension. And it cannot be used for any debts that were not already in effect as of February 15th. It also can't be used for political contributions, for relending, for real estate purchases, or for investing. but pretty much everything else it can be used for. It can be used for advertising. It can be used for payroll. It can be used for paying your insurance, paying your mortgage, interest and principal both. You can't prepay, you know, into the future. It can even be used if you had an EIDL loan, an economic injury disaster loan. You can use it to make payments on that loan once you have to start making payments on it. And you will have to maintain your records for 3 years. Your regular records, any payroll records, you will have to maintain those for 4 years. And this grant is monitored, so you'll have to actually submit reports. They haven't stated exactly how you're going to do that, but most likely it'll be quarterly. And then, you know, on how you're spending the money and making sure that you're spending it properly. In order to apply, you do apply directly at the SBA's website, that SVO grant portal. In order to apply, you have to have a SAMS number. So SAM is a System for Award Management, and it's a free number for you to get. You just have to go through the rigmarole of actually applying for it at sam.gov. You register in the system. You'll need what they call an eBiz POC. So that's an electronic business point of contact. So who is it that you want to receive emails and other notifications? You'll need a notarized letter of need stating, hey, yes, we definitely need, you know, we're going to need this grant that we're applying for. And you'll need your federal ID number. In order to get a SAM number, you have to first have a DUNS number. Again, it's free. So a DUNS number is a Dun & Bradstreet Data Universal Numbering System. It's a 9-digit character, whereas the SAM number is a cage code with its 5 characters. And you're going to need a lot of information when you apply. So these are the things that you can get together so that once you start your application, you actually have everything you need so that you're not pausing, like Michael had talked about at the very beginning. You're not pausing and not submitting after you started, and because you don't have these things together. So you're going to need payroll records. You're going to need employee counts. You might need blueprints if you're a live performing arts venue that shows or pictures that actually show that you have a designated performing space and a designated audience space. You will definitely need your tax returns for 2019 and 2020 if you have them. You'll need, we mentioned already, you'll need marketing material samples. You will need to differentiate between your gross revenues each month in 2019 and each month in 2020, as well as your earned revenues in each month of 2019 and each month of 2020. So that's a lot of very particular information that they want you to split apart on a monthly basis for 2019 and for 2020. And then they also want the first quarter of 2021 as well. So January, February, March of this year, they're going to want your gross revenues as well as your earned revenues split out. If you're a nonprofit, you have to show evidence of your nonprofit status. If you're a for-profit, you'll need to upload your proof of whatever you are, articles of organization, your corporate articles, or your partnership agreement. You'll need a copy of your government issued photo ID, which can be your passport or like your driver's license. And then the certificate of need, we mentioned that. The certificate of need has to specifically, the reason there's an asterisk there is because the certificate of need has to include that your organization was in business as of February 29th of last year, and whether or not you are currently open or whether you plan to reopen. So there's a couple of things in there that must be in that certificate of need letter. And that is something you will upload into the portal. So a couple of things to keep in mind once you get started on the portal. You have to use Safari, Firefox, Edge, or Google as your browser. You cannot use Explorer. The portal will not work in Explorer. If you have applied for an economic injury disaster loan in the past, your email username will automatically populate because they will recognize your name. And so You can't use that though as your username. You'll have to select a different username. So even though it pre-populates, you're going to need to select a different username, or it won't allow you to authenticate and validate who you are. Different sections of the application have attachments that are required. Some of those that we just talked about. There is a limit of 10 attachments for each of those sections. The attachments have to be less than 35 megabytes. It will not accept zip files or compressed files. It will not accept password protected files. And it only accepts the ones that you see here as far as the types of files that you can upload. So if it's a different type than that, then you're going to need to convert it. There is a multi-factor authentication app that's required. And every time that you log in, if you have to log in multiple times, you will be required to re-authenticate who you are. And so it gives it, you can go to Google Play or one of those apps where you purchase other apps. You can go there and actually purchase like a QR code reader or some other multi-factor authentication app, and it will allow you to do what you need to do. So if you're not familiar with this, kind of in the picture that you see here, it'll say, you know, scan this QR code. So you have to have a QR code scanner. Most phones now, if they're a newer phone, you can actually just use your camera and scan the QR code. You don't even have to download a QR app. So you scan the QR code. It will send you a validation code. You have to then take that validation code, plug it into the portal, and that authenticates who you are. And the email address that you enter in the portal will be the only email address that will ever receive communications regarding this particular grant. So make sure it's the email that you want to receive all of the information. And the system does have an auto log off after 15 minutes of inactivity. So that makes it all that much more important for you to try to have all of your paperwork scanned and ready to go so that you can upload it and not have to stop, find it, scan it, upload it, or what have you, because it will log you off and then you have to go through the authentication again. So one of the things I think that might trip up people is that they do have to have a proposed budget ready to go and to put in and to enter into the application online. And these are the categories that the application asks for. So you can have a 0 in them if it doesn't pertain to you or something, but it is going to ask for your budget, and these are the line item expenses that you can list. And state and local taxes on the bottom right there, you'll see you can use this grant to pay for any of the state taxes, including real estate property taxes, as well as any local city taxes that you may have. Personnel, just so you know, also includes independent contractors. And mortgage payments, you cannot prepay principal or anything like that with your mortgage payments. So you have to make sure, again, that those expenses will only be the expenses that were incurred during that time period of March 1st of last year through December 31st of this year. Other scheduled debt payments, as long as they existed before February 15th of last year, you can use the grant for that. But you cannot use the grant to pay credit cards. And so that's important to note, even though, you know, that's kind of scheduled, right? It's kind of a scheduled debt that you have. Pay it usually around the same time every month. But you can't use it for paying the credit card unless the expense that you're paying for is something that it falls into one of these other categories that you see. If you happen to use a credit card to pay for advertising or insurance or, you know, utilities one time, then you'll have to prove that that's what the payment was for, but that portion of the credit card bill can then be paid for with the use of these grant funds. And then you'll see capital expenditures. So the capital expenditures this grant can only be used for capital expenditures if it's related to producing a live performing arts or theatrical production, and it is not the primary use of the funds. So the primary use of the funds is meant to be working capital, operating expenses, not capital expenditures. You cannot go out and build a brand new theater. You can't do that. So, but if you do need to, like if you replace your roof tiles every year that go bad, and you do that kind of on a yearly or every other year basis, that's an ongoing capital expenditure. You can use it for that. So, but it does have to be a typical operating expense that you usually have. And you have to stay within 10% of each of these budget line items. So once you put in the number there, keep in mind, you have to stay within 10% of that amount, or you're going to have to go through a formal change process in order to change your budget. All right, so that was a lot of information in a short amount of time, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has, if they have any. And I didn't keep up with the chat at all when I was doing that, so.
I think Brandon's going to field those chat questions, but there's a lot of great questions and feedback in there. And I just want to say, Rebecca, thank you for doing this, because that was a lot to unpack, and you did an outstanding job.
Yeah, I could not concur more heartily. Joel and I were, in fact, independently texting about how delighted we are about how much you know about this.
Well, I'm glad.
So Brandon, did you want to get us with some questions out of the chat? And Joel and I can also participate doing that as well.
Yeah, we're happy to do it.
Yeah, I'm happy to field some questions, but if you want to, go for it. But because I was kind of keeping tabs. So this is from Frank Dumond. Some venues like ours, theirs may be multi-purpose, and trying to figure out how to fit a seemingly square peg into a round hole, can be kind of complicated with the multi-purpose aspect of it, I guess. So you touched on this a little bit, but can circuses, et cetera, with regular paid employees be considered eligible? So it sounds like you mentioned traveling ones, but this seems like it might be a secured, stationary kind of a venue.
Okay, so circuses, what it will depend on is if they have a designated audience space and a designated performance space. So even if that is even if those spaces are designated at the venue that they rent out for their circus, that's fine. If they rent it out, but they would have to show that they do have those two spaces separated out as a circus, and then they would qualify.
Okay. The next, you mentioned contract employers as well, but this person was told that their contractors should not be considered employees. However, so you kind of touched on that, so I think that's been kind of debunked. But
let me add to that just a touch.
Sure.
So they're not counted as employees when you're including your employee count, but when you're putting together your budget for the shuttered venue grant, on that personnel line, you can include independent contractors on that line.
Okay. It says it won't let this person enter 0, or it says not eligible. So that may be an application thing that I can send to Michael. That may be important just as they're building the algorithm of the thing. That might be helpful. But so if you have any insight on, like, the application won't let them enter 0, otherwise it says not eligible. So I'm guessing that means those contract workers may be the only employees maybe that they have. So Vita, if you want to chime in here, unmute yourself and chime in, give us some insight on the question, that might be helpful. But go ahead, Rebecca, if you had something else to add.
I was just going to say that if they are a nonprofit, then they are, and they put on free shows, then they are required to have employees to produce those. And if they show a 0 there, that would make them ineligible. Is that the case, Vita?
She's on. Vita, if you're there, I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Hi. We have 2 contract workers and no paid employees, but we do stipends for, like, directors, choreographers, musicians.
And are you a nonprofit?
Yes.
And do you charge for the shows?
Yes.
Okay, so then that wouldn't be the issue. So then I don't know why the portal is not letting you put in a 0. This is
God's will.
my honest answer.
Yeah, so
Rebecca,
maybe, go ahead, Joel.
I was going to say, if I understand correctly, the way to look at contractors is on the expense line, right? You're paying them as an expense, just like you would if you were a business contracting with somebody, but that money isn't designed to benefit the contractors. It's designed to benefit the organization who is doing the contracting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So instead of putting 0, I should put 2. I just don't want to be thrown in jail for counting a contractor as an employee. I think the word employee is the sticky point for us anyway.
Yeah, according to the frequently asked questions that the SBA has posted, when they're asking for your employee count, you do not count independent contractors.
Well, that's my issue, because
right.
If I put 0, then it says that I'm ineligible.
Maybe it may be something in the other criteria you've selected that may be like not working with that portion. So I will send this query to Michael to let him know that this is an issue with the submission. But in the meantime, Vita, you might double check to make sure that all of the other aspects of what needs to fit the criteria are selected correctly. But I'll CC you on that so that you can receive an answer with me, okay?
Thank you.
You bet. Frank also asked, must museums be nonprofits?
Yes.
Okay. So does your application automatically save? So as you're going through it, does it automatically save, or do you have to make sure that you click a button?
That I don't know.
Anyone who filled it out know?
Actually, it does automatically save, which is wonderful, because I had a period of inactivity, got kicked out, and I thought, oh my God, I've been working on this for 90 minutes and lost something. So it allows you to save, but it also auto saves, which is what we found. Yeah, right. While I'm here, let me just ask a question to you. Another thing that I didn't see in your last criteria. When the first regs, for lack of a better term, came out, my understanding is there were 3 criteria, and we're one of the smaller operations. So we thought we were in the 3rd. Now it looks like there's just 2. There also was, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, there also was a sort of first come, first serve. So in other words, you had to be eligible, but that applications were reviewed and funded as they were received. But it appears that's no longer correct.
That's right. There's a priority given for the first 2 weeks to those who received 90% or greater, lost 90% or more of their revenues. And then the second tier is for the second 2 weeks that the grant is open. That's for those who lost 70% or more. Now, those that are entered that meet that criteria will be funded on a first come, first serve. And then if there's funding left over, that 3rd tier is everybody else who lost money but didn't lose 70% or more in 2020.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Can I ask if somebody who lost 90% or more of their revenue submits their application next Thursday or Friday, are you still in the first priority tier, or because it's going to take a while for the SBA to turn around to examine your application? So does the two-week window expire while they're, or is it when you submit your application that matters?
It's when you submit your application, because that's one of the reasons that they're giving a 28-day window after the first 28 days is because they know it's going to take time to see how many of those that actually submitted their applications completed them fully, how many are really going to get funded before they can figure out if they even have funding left over for everybody else.
Okay. So you can apply next Friday at 5 p.m. and still be in the first priority tier?
That's my understanding, yes. I wouldn't wait till the last minute on purpose.
Right, right. Just asking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. And then Sydney with Heart of America, can you expand on your question? I want to make sure that we get it answered, but I just can't, it just doesn't, it's kind of broken up to where I'm not quite sure.
I gotcha. Sorry, I think I just kept typing.
Okay.
Thanks for your help today. I'm just concerned about the dates that the budget is supposed to reflect. I've heard, I keep getting different sort of responses, so I just want to know what dates should our budget be encompass?
Right. So you have 1 year to spend the money, but the expenses can only be, so your budget is for expenses incurred March 1st of last year through the end of this year.
So this budget form that we have to complete should only be for March 1st, 2021 through the end of this year.
March 1st, 2020, last year.
2020, sorry, through
the end
of
this year.
Got it.
Yeah, it's almost a 2-year period. It's like 21 months.
Got it.
The budget form itself doesn't have dates on it, though, in the application.
No, it does
You
not.
have the amount that's calculated for you. I mean, we calculated ours, but it calculates it for you, and you put those amounts in the eligible categories. Right. So it doesn't matter if you don't have to say if it's 21 or 22, at least as the form was in the portal.
Okay. So it looks like that might be, Vita's next question was, can we submit our regular 2021 budget, or does this need to be something specific to the expenses allowed? But I think you covered that with the last question. So Jennifer Owen, they're a dance group, is a performing arts group that performs in different venues throughout the year. This is a nonprofit as well, but doesn't have its own designated venue eligible to apply.
So yes, they can still apply just because they don't have a physical space that they have of their own. That's fine.
Okay, great.
That's not a criteria.
Yeah. So the follow-up, is the budget only to include the amount of the grant? It seems like that is yes.
Yes, because it won't fund more than that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then Carrie, just so you know, I will send the answer about the contractor employees portal issue. I'll send that, go ahead and send that to everyone, just so everyone knows. And then Sydney also asked, are fringe benefits in the budget, healthcare, et cetera?
Yes, they are. That was listed in that list of expenses that it specifically asked for, and fringe is a separate line item expense.
Okay, great. All right, and we will, I'll make sure that people see that as well. Can you talk a little bit more about the notarized letter of need? Just what needs to be included in that to make sure it hits the mark?
Yeah, how crazy is that, right? Like, but if you got to have it, you got to have it. So, anyway, if you show that you have a 25% reduction in revenue, because that makes you eligible, to me, that is showing need. But anyway, you have to actually have a letter that has your organization's name on it. and it has to be signed by an authorized person. So your board president or executive director or somebody like that. And it has to stipulate that you need this grant because of, the pandemic, and that you either are or are not in operation. If you're not in operation, then you need to state when you plan to reopen. And then that letter actually has to be notarized. I mean, it can be just a couple sentences. It's nothing. It's really nothing. And in the frequently on the SBA's portal, if you go to sba.gov and you just look for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, there's a nice long list of frequently asked questions, a PDF that you can download. There is actual verbiage in there that you can use for your letter of need.
Oh, that's good to know. Anyone else have a question while we still have just a couple of minutes? If you have a question or need expansion on something, just go ahead and unmute yourself. Carrie, regarding tax returns needed. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Carrie, you can go ahead and ask.
Yeah, hi. It said if your fiscal year 2020 is split, which ours is, so therefore not everything in 2020 will have done tax returns yet, then you'll need your 2018. So my question is, do we therefore need all three, 18, 19, and what we have of our 2020 tax returns? Or does that mean that we don't turn in the 2020, we just do 18 and 19?
It means that you don't turn in the 2020 tax return because you don't have it, but you will have to turn in financials, your internal financials that show January through December of 2020, because that's the dates they're looking at. So they understand it's not time for you to file your tax return yet because you're on a different fiscal year than the calendar year, but you will still have to show what your monthly revenues were in 2020. And so you're going to have to submit your internal financials. Okay, yeah, we have that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There was one question from Brian as well beforehand. So Michael talked a little bit about this at the beginning, about the number of applications that had been started versus the number that had been submitted, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any, do you know, is there a way that you can get regular updates, or if you can find regular updates about the applications, including like the total submitted, the number of applications showing 90% or greater loss of income, just some different levels of data about that to know, I guess, what your chances are or what, you know, what's been collected already. Do you know if they're going to be releasing any information like that?
Well, all I can tell you that I know, and Rebecca and Joel, speak up if you know differently, is that look for the PPP program. They released weekly, they now are releasing weekly updates on, you know, and you can go to data.sba.gov to find that information. So my guess is that they will do the same for this particular grant program, but I don't know that for certain. I just know that they did that with the PPP, and anything through the government is considered open to the public. So,
and if you go to the local SBA website, you can find the contact information for some of our local entities, and those might be, I think, probably the most direct way to get that information. But correct me if you think that's wrong. But like, if I were wanting to know, I would probably ask the local outreach of the SBA to see if they have any of those numbers. Like Michael did this morning. Go ahead, Rebecca.
No, I think that's a great idea. They tend to keep us updated about that kind of a thing. It tends to go out on websites. They tend to send information through SBA funded organizations like us, but we're also all learning together. Remember, each time they're like, hey, here's a giant bucket of money in a way we've never done before. And so please, I know it is so tough when you've been struggling like this, but to remember that they're doing the best they can to help a snake swallow a grapefruit of need. And so that would, that can be helpful as well. And just remember that we're here to help you navigate these issues one-on-one as well, to help with questions. And that's largely what the SBA office asks us to do.
Okay. Great. Anything else from anyone? We just lastly, if not, I think that we, what's the anticipated time frame to receive funding if it is granted? Did we touch on this? I can't remember.
I actually don't have an answer for that. I don't know what their turnaround will be.
Okay. Okay. It seems like it's because it's rolling, you know, they're kind of taking things as they come, that I would imagine the regranting will be similarly, that there'll be lots of different, you know, it's not like when they announce, you know, our direct stimulus payments that people like will start getting them, and then, you know, a lot of people get one the first day. It seems like it will be rolling as the applications are as well, but I could be wrong on that. The FAQ does not mention that the certification of need must be notarized. I think the notarized letter is required for acquiring an SAM account. Any confirmation of that?
I'll double check on that.
Okay.
I believe that's correct. I actually was dying over here, but yes, that's my understanding as well.
Okay. So that FAQ sheet, as Joel mentioned, is, you know, lengthy. So, you know, it probably will be easy to do a Control F find on some topics if you have some keywords that you need to type in there. So I would just encourage you all to do that as well. Use that FAQ page as a great resource. So anyway, well, I think that we've covered a lot of ground here. I've seen in the chat that people feel like this has been really, really helpful, and that this has been one of the most robust discussions that they have had on this. Cindy just said huge questions about budget info. That's what might be causing people. Okay, that was from earlier, excuse me. So thank you so much to both Rebecca's, to Joel. Thank you for your input. Thank you to Michelle for helping put this together. Thank you to Michael Barrera, who was with us earlier. I'm so glad that he was able to join us and give us a little bit of insight. So thanks to you all. Again, I will be sending the recording of this from our YouTube channel to all of those who've registered. Michelle, if you can pass along the slides or whoever, any of the other resources that we mentioned here, I'll make sure that we get those in your hands as well. I believe Michelle also said they might be sending out a survey just about their regular for your feedback from this. So please complete that if you're able to. But this has been a really great session, and I'm so glad that we were able to get this in front of the people who need it the most. We've gotten a ton of questions about this, and even with it opening already, I know that just creates more once people actually dive in there. So with that, thank you to you all, and we will see you next time. I would encourage you, go to artskc.org and sign up for our advocacy emails if information like this is important to you as well. So thanks you all, and have a great rainy day. Take care.